And so we were reading at length yesterday the verse فَمَنِ اضْطَرَّ غَيْرَ بَاغٍ وَلَا عَادٍ, which was somebody who was forced. And we mentioned yesterday 3 types of haja or difficulty or mashaqqa that we can recognize in the Sharia. When the haram becomes halal. And this is a system that we see again and again and again in the Sharia, which is what? Further, if you remind us for the 8th time.
Duress.
We have duress. So in a situation of life or death, situation where your property is going to be taken away, your children are going to be taken away from you, something very inappropriate is going to happen to you, etc. And if that's going to happen, that's duress. That's called darura. Negligible, right? Mashaqqa, what was the term they use? غير معتبرة, right? It's an insignificant difficulty, such as the inconvenience of making wudu. Like it's inconvenient to make wudu, right? It's not most people, unless it's hot, people don't really want to go and make wudu. It's an inconvenience. So does that allow you to not pray because of the difficulty of making wudu? No. Or the awkwardness of pronouncing the ha, right? So I remember I was 14 and my brother told me, in Arabic there's ha and ha and ha. It's like the same letter. So my ear couldn't even hear the ha and the ha. I couldn't even hear ha. I can't even hear the word. And in England, we have the sound ha. So in Scotland, they use the word loch for a lake. So Loch Ness, right? I've heard of the Loch Ness monster. So loch. So I grew up hearing the word loch, but my ear couldn't hear loch. My ear could only hear loch, right? And in Wales, they say chla. They have a chla sound. Chlandailo, chlanechli. They say cha. My ear can't hear it. I can only hear lanelli. I can't hear it. So the fact that I have to learn a sound that I cannot pronounce in order to worship Allah properly, that is negligible because you just have to put some effort into it and you can do it, right? And if you can't, it's overlooked, right? So there's certain things that seem difficult, but they're not that difficult. So it's a negligible difficulty. The difficulty of wearing hijab when it's embarrassing, right? So the embarrassment of saying my name is Muhammad and not saying Mo, right? I just want to fit in, right? So the embarrassment is awkward. I just want to fit in. That's negligible. So you have darura and you have negligible difficulty, right? Or it could be not negligible, but it's maqsood min haythuhu, right? For example, I'm a fireman and I'm being paid to risk my life to die for other people. Does the fact that I could die, does that relieve me of the obligation of saving people? No, because that's your job, right? Does the fact that you could die in jihad mean you don't do jihad? No. The al-maut, right? In that situation, death or dying shahada is maqsuda min haythu hiya, right? It's sort of in and of itself. So it might be really difficult, but you're supposed to do that. You're a millionaire and it costs $1 million to go on Hajj. So nobody in America goes on Hajj apart from you, because you have to have $1 million to go on Hajj. Does that alleviate you from the obligation because it costs $1 million? No. If it costs $1 million and you have $1 million, and that's in excess of your needs and excess of your debts, and that's fine. So the fact that it costs a lot of money doesn't mean that you don't have to pay, because that's the point of Hajj. You're supposed to spend money and time, etc. Right? So there's things that's either negligible or maqsood min haythuhu, right? It's sort of in itself. And then what else, Badr?
Common and widespread.
So mashaqqa عادية or متكررة العامة, right? Widespread, they call it عموم البلوى. So widespread difficulty. So the example of the past is, I walk from my house 150 years ago to the masjid. The streets are all used, they have animals on the streets, cows and sheep and horses. So I walk to the masjid. Obviously, I'm going to have najas on my feet. And I'm going to have some najas on my trousers. That's going to happen if I walk 20 minutes here, 20 minutes there. Everybody's going to have najas on them. That's going to be normal. So to expect me to fly is not normal. So obviously it's going to be to excuse blood. I'm cooking meat, and I slaughtered the meat in a halal way. You can't get every single drop of blood of meat. It's not possible. You're not expected to go through every single vein and every single thing. So there's going to be some blood in it. But that's overlooked because that'll be too difficult otherwise, right? And there's many examples of that. And we mentioned yesterday the best example of that in America is medical insurance, because medical insurance in America is not a darura. You wouldn't die if you didn't have medical insurance, right? No one's going to kick you out of your house tomorrow morning if you didn't have medical insurance. But you would be in a very difficult situation if you didn't have medical insurance, you didn't pay for it, you didn't get Medi-Cal. Tomorrow you're going to be in a very difficult situation. And that's not just me, it's going to be Badr, it's going to be so and so, every single one of us. Very different to, for example, medical insurance in England. I don't need medical insurance in England. Or maybe in Afghanistan, you can just pay out of pocket, it's not a problem, right? Or in many countries you can pay. It's not, I don't know how much it costs in the Philippines. You know, you have surgery, I don't know. People can normally afford it. It's a normal thing that it's difficult, but it's a normal, affordable thing, as opposed to in America and Canada, it's not affordable. $20,000 because your son fell over and, you know, and whatever, broke his leg. That's a lot of money when we have 8 children. We're always falling over, and elderly people in your family and etc. Right? So these are examples of that. It's not the highest level. When you say man ittarra, yes, I'm not gonna die, but it is haja amma, right? Widespread difficulty, etc. And so there's many things like that. And then there are issues that are debated. So again, this verse, I don't want to go on and on, but this verse is relevant when it comes to riba. So people who say you can buy a house in riba in America, you can use an interest loan to buy a riba in America, you basically have 3 arguments. Right? Basically 3 arguments. Argument number 1, dollar doesn't money. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has forbidden a riba in gold and silver. And gold and silver have value, right? And they're enshrined by the Sharia, like the Sharia recognizes it. You pay zakat in gold and silver, etc. So they say a dollar is not money. Fiat currency is not money. It's just made up, right? So there's some logic to that, right? That's like if I was playing Monopoly, right? And I say, hey, Badr, can you lend me 100 Monopoly dollars? Can I give him 110 back? Yeah, you can do that. Because it's not money. It's not actual money, right? He can lend me 100, I can give him 110, that's fine. So there's no riba when there's no money involved, because it's not money, right? If we said that, then it means there's also no zakat, because you don't have any money, right? So you have $1 billion, there's no zakat to pay because you don't have any money. There's not money. But also it would be haram to trade in it. So it'd be haram to hire people and give them dollars because you're not giving them anything. And it'd be haram to buy in dollars. So if you want to follow that madhab, go and live on the moon. Or go and live in your own island. Because what you're trying to say is, I don't recognize the dollar. You can't function if you don't live like that. Right? So people who give these kind of fatwa, they should go and live on the moon. Right? And they might say it's obligatory. Okay, fine. It's haram to live in any place where they use money like that. Okay. But you can't be two-sided. You can't be you know, you got to be consistent. So if you say it's not money and there's no zakat and there's no riba, also it's haram to trade in it. You're not allowed to trade in it. Right? So they have to be consistent in your logic. So that's argument number 1. Argument number 2 is that this is a war zone. We live in a war zone. And in a war zone, certain rules of the Sharia don't apply. Right? So for example, let's imagine Badr is the enemy. Am I allowed to take his hat in a war zone? I can do whatever I want to him. So can I charge him interest in a war zone? Yeah. Of course I can do that. Anything I can get from him is fine. If I can kill him, if I can steal his hat, if I can steal his watch, of course I can charge him interest. Right? Underline the word charge him interest. So the concept then is that we're in a war zone here, apparently. I don't see any rockets being fired, but apparently we're in a war zone. And in a war zone, the Sharia doesn't apply in the same way. So I can take things from other people, so therefore I could take interest. But can I give interest? That's a problem. So if you say we live in a war zone, which I don't think I live in a war zone, but anyway, if you say we live in a war zone, and that means you could kill anybody anywhere because everybody is a war zone, okay? And that means you could take interest. So I could lend money to Badr, $100, and take 110 back because it's a war zone. Again, such person should not be living in America. I will, if you tell me you live in a war zone and you think it's okay, halal, to go and kill people in the street, I will call the police on you now. I will call the police on you now because you're a dangerous individual. You think we live in a war zone, dar harb, and you think that you can just go and kill people because it's a war zone, right? So the way they could conceive of it is like, I'm in Gaza and this Israeli soldier comes in and I gave him $10 and I got back 11. I don't have a problem with that. That's fine, but we're not in Gaza, and these people around us are not Israeli soldiers. That's not the takif al-shar'i. That's not the takayyuf al-shar'i. That's not the reality of what is going on. So that's argument number two. We live in a war zone. I don't live in a war zone. You don't live in a war zone. That's not actually reality. We don't live in Gaza. It's not the same situation, right? We don't live in the same situation. And who spoke about this a long time ago? The scholars of India. So when the British took over India, people said, oh, this is a war zone now. Riba is now halal. They said, no, we're talking about, this is not a war zone. You can't do that. So the scholars of India, a long time ago, they spelt out, they said, no, it doesn't mean that. What they're talking about is the frontiers. Let's say, for example, places that were being conquered by Muslims were not conquered yet. In those places, a merchant might go out there at his own risk, lend to a kafir, because this and an interest, because he could take interest just like he could take anything, right? But that doesn't mean you can give interest. So the logic, so the first argument says you could give and take because it's not money, but it has a huge series of problems. Okay. Second argument is we're in a war zone, and we don't live in a war zone, because the same logic that would allow you to do riba would allow you to kill people, right? I could do that. If I lent to an Israeli soldier who is invading Gaza, could I kill him? Yeah. So I could take money from him and kill him. So that means your logic dictates that you could walk around the street just looting places. And so that's a very dangerous fatwa. We have to understand that whenever you say A, you mean B, right? And I'll give you an example of A and B. Somebody who says, for example, if you didn't pray in the past, you were a kafir, so there's no qada. What does that mean? So Badr, for example, he just started praying recently. May Allah reward, mashallah. When he was young, he didn't used to pray. And he just started praying this year. So the logic is they'll say, if you don't pray, you're a kafir. And so you just became Muslim now, and khalas, you just started fresh, right? Why is that fatwa very, very dangerous? Because what does it mean about half of the ummah? Half of the ummah are what? Kuffar. Your children might not be your children because you didn't used to pray and you were married to a Muslim and she was not actually your wife. So now this daughter of yours is not your daughter. The son of yours is not your son. He can't inherit from you. The inheritance you got from your dad who didn't used to pray was not your money. If you gave a fatwa like that, you say it's okay. Somebody who didn't pray in the past, they don't have to do qada because, you weren't a Muslim anyway. It's convenient because there's no qada. It's not convenient because you said half of the ummah not even Muslims. Suddenly that Muslim ruler, right, that was holding things together in a 50-50 way, now you say he's not a ruler because he's not a Muslim. He doesn't pray. So the fatwa breaks the whole ummah. So we have to always be careful of those things. A fatwa that makes sense from one point of view, but if you gave that fatwa, you would destroy everything. Right? Imagine how many marriages you would destroy. The marriage is already shaky. And then the sister goes and asks the sheikh, my husband doesn't pray. I said, okay, you're not even married to him, don't worry. Or vice versa, sheikh, my wife doesn't pray. Yeah, it's okay, she's not a Muslim anyway. That's a very, very dangerous fatwa. Right? Ibn Qudama al-Maqdisi, he said there's consensus that was never applied. You read it in the books, a theory, but he says consensus, it was never applied. Right? So we have to understand when you say A, you mean B. Right? There's always an A and a B. So argument number one, money is not money. Therefore, riba is fine. That's a very dangerous fatwa. You should go and live on the moon. Argument number two, we're in a war zone. You should leave the country then. If you think we're in a war zone, go somewhere else. Right? If you think we live in a war zone, go somewhere else. Because I don't think we live in a war zone. Right? Why would you be allowed to come and live in a war zone? Imam Ahmad said it's haram to get married in a war zone. You can't do that. So that means you can't get married here. So you say you can do riba, but you can get married. That doesn't make sense. You have to be consistent. Right? If you live in a war zone, would you have children in a war zone? Of course, you wouldn't have children in a war zone. You would never bring your wife to a war zone. Right? So we have to be consistent with our logic. Argument number three. It's darura. I live in America. I cannot pay rent for 30 years of my life. I'm not happy to pay $1 million in rent. And then I still don't own my house. I can't do that. So the argument is, it's haja amma. They all agree it's not a darura. You wouldn't die if you had to pay rent. We all agree on that. But the argument number three is, yes, it is by default haram. Yes, money is money. Yes, we're not on a war zone. Yes, riba is haram. But you can give riba in this situation because it's a widespread difficulty that applies to me and you and everybody else. That we all need to own property. And if we didn't own property, it would be very, very difficult. Is that actually true? 99% of the ummah says that's not true. That is a negligible difficulty. That's like, for example, the reformist Jews. Reformist Jews, for example, they don't wear hijab. They don't abide by the laws because they want to fit in, right? So the same thing is we should fit in and just, do what everybody else does, right? So 99% of modern scholars saying that that's not true. That not having property is totally fine. Like it's okay not to have property. Like you can just rent and you'll survive. Like you're not gonna die if you just rent your whole life. It's okay. And also there's other halal ways to do things, right? There are halal ways of doing things. So the argument here is, so those people who say you can buy a house at interest, one of those three arguments. Either we're in a war zone, which we're not, or money is not money, in which case why you have nothing, right? You shouldn't. And the argument number three is فَمَنِ اضْطَرَّ غَيْرَ عَادٍ وَلَا غَيْرَ بَاغٍ وَلَا عَادٍ, that you're forced, right? This person is like, yeah, Allah, I've lived in America, I've seen America for long enough, and I've seen that if the people of America, the Muslim America, don't have property, this will happen to them. It'll be a widespread difficulty, right? So I just want to compare this to a scenario. I wouldn't say one of my teachers, but one of my advisors who spoke about a similar situation. So this is Sheikh Abdul Malik Sa'di. Sheikh Abdul Malik Sa'di was effectively the Hanafi, he's a Hanafi and Shafi, but he's a Mufti of Iraq, right? The only reason why he's not literally the Mufti of Iraq is because he doesn't want to represent anybody. He doesn't want to represent the government. He doesn't want to represent this organization. Nobody. So he was a huge scholar in Iraq and very much involved in politics and very real. Many scholars, they just live in a masjid, right? They're just like Maulana, like you talk about the books, but you don't see life. But he's someone very real in politics. Saddam Hussein broke his legs, right? And then he forgave Saddam Hussein. He was actually an advisor to Saddam Hussein. And even now he's between Jordan and Iraq, and he's getting involved in politics and helping people, peaceful riots and et cetera, et cetera. He's someone who's involved in the world. So I was there in the class, and this Iraqi asked, this says, Sheikh, we have a problem. There's an area in Baghdad which is all being bought up by the Shia. And if the Shia buy all the area, it will be very dangerous and difficult for Sunnis to live there. It'll be very, very hard. So what we could do, Sheikh, is you all get interest loans which are available. We all get interest loans, and then we can go ahead and just buy up this place. And then it will be a safe place for Sunnis to live. What was the response that Sheikh Abdul Malik Sa'id did? This very balanced, he has a website which is called Al-Wasatiyya. He's got like the balance, like what's balanced, the balanced way of living. He's not extreme at all, and he's very involved in the world, right? What was his response? He says, if you can get a piece of wood and put it over your head, then you have no excuse to do riba. That was his response. Right? That's his response. Is like, no, like if you're forced, you're forced. right? Rent is just not, there is no rent, period. Rent does not exist. There's no way I could possibly rent. And the only way I can buy is through riba. Okay. You have literally you couldn't leave the country and you can't stay in any house at all and then now you're forced in this situation. Otherwise, you're not forced. Right. And this is the kind of general take of 99% of the scholars in the world. Right. And again, if you apply that to the West, so the argument is in the West, Muslims need property. Okay, what about other places? What about Afghanistan? What about Egypt? What about Jordan? People can't afford. Like in Jordan, I saw people like they can't afford to survive. It's like they work for 10 hours a day, 7 days a week, and now they're breaking even. They're just starting to break even. Right? So many places in the world have financial problems. Right? Many places in the world have financial problems. But as they say, necessity is the mother of invention. Is that right? Is when you're in a difficult situation, you can be creative. So there's such thing as Islamic financing. There's ways you can do that. It's not that difficult. Right? It's not that difficult. It does exist here in America. It can exist. It can be done in a not just a halal way, but a 100% halal way. Right? And so we have to be, this is a very key thing. I kind of spoke about it for like half an hour yesterday and repeat it again and again and again, because people often think in a funny way. Right? The way that they look at these things is kind of very odd. Right? Another example of this is, for example, sisters exposing their forearm. So what is the argument for exposing your forearm? The argument is that when somebody who is involved with manual labor, I'm working in a farm, I'm butchering animals, I'm washing up, I'm, I don't know, cutting grass. It's very difficult to work with sleeves, right? So because it's a widespread recurrent difficulty for women who work with their hands, some scholars, not most scholars, but some scholars, they said a woman when she's doing manual labor, she can roll her sleeves up to here, and that's okay, right? But here we have the sister sitting in an office. You're not involved in manual labor. Here you have sister who just doesn't really care. So you can just see her forearm anyway. So now what is it? It says, whoever is forced, right? غير عاد ولا غير باغ ولا عاد. They don't want to do the haram, nor are they going over the limit. So sister, when your grandmother used to work in a paddy field, is one thing. For you, working in an office is something else. So I can understand a woman working in a paddy field. She's planting rice the whole day, and her arm is getting all wet, and she has to bend over. It's very difficult, hard work. She's washing up. It's very hard work. But you're sitting in an office like this. It's totally fine to have your arms covered, right? And so people often treat negligible difficulty as duress, like I have to do the haram now, right? Or another example when it comes to interest, I'm going to do medicine, right? Did anybody study medicine here? Does anybody know how much it costs? We're talking about like a third of $1,000,000, $500,000, right? So it's going to cost me $1/3 for my son to do. Mashallah, he's been accepted, but it's going to cost him $1/3 over the next 4 years after he's finished his undergrad to now do medicine. And this is a darura, because otherwise, how would he work? This is a duress. He would die if he didn't become a doctor, and we would all die if he didn't become a doctor. That's not true. It's just not true. So, I remember in a situation like when my dad was at college in England, they paid you to be at college. So you go to college for free and they pay you to be there. And then in England, they stopped paying, but it was free. And then in England, it was like a negligible amount. Like in Europe, it's like $500 a year to go to college. Like it's not a small amount. It's not a lot of money. It's free, basically free. And then in England, it became 10,000, 20,000. I don't know how much it is now. So in England now, like I know people who didn't even study in England. They moved to Scotland before they're 18, or they moved to someplace in Europe because it's free. Right? So then I'm in England and I have to get a degree. You don't have to get a degree. So then I have to get a degree. So now I have to do interest. You don't have to do interest. You could just do another job. All right? My brother's an ER doctor. He said, had I opened a kebab shop, I would have made much more money. right? It's not actually the only way you can make money. There's lots of halal ways to make money. So many people, they think like I have to do this. I have to do this. What you mean is it's very important to you, right? It's very important for me to look at this woman. It's very important for me to touch this woman. Yeah, but Habibi, that's not halal. What is very important to you does not make it halal. So there's a big difference between it's inconvenient versus this is a widespread difficulty, right? So we have to understand there's life and death, the haram becomes halal. There's inconvenience, the haram does not become halal. And there's things that are widespread, recurrent difficulties that are very, very hard, and that does change the halal, does change the haram to halal. But that's not just any inconvenience, right? And so those scholars who come along today, they say in the West, it's important for Muslims to establish themselves, and it'd be very hard if Muslims didn't own property. I mean, you can use that argument anywhere. Again, in Afghanistan, I don't have property. It's very hard. If you don't own property, it's very hard. In England, in any Muslim country, so like everywhere's hard. And everywhere the haram is available. Everywhere the haram is available. So we are being tested. Allah does not ask us to kill ourselves, nor does He ask us to do recurrent, difficult things again and again and again. We don't fast every single day of the year. We just fast 30 days. If Allah asks us to fast 365 days of the year, that would be very hard, right? That would be very hard. But it's just, it's not a recurrent difficulty. It's a one-off difficulty, just 30 days. That's it, just 30 days. So we have to understand this system. Life and death, negligible, very significant, right? Not so significant. This is a system that we have to have in our head, right? And we only do the haram when Allah wants us to do the haram. Like here's pork. Allah doesn't want you to die. You have to eat this pork because otherwise you would die. Allah wants you to do that. You are choking. Allah wants you to drink the wine so that you can spit the thing out your etc. Right? Your child needs to get on a plane tomorrow morning. Like there's a war zone. You have to get, the only way you can do it is in the haram. You have to, for example, get an interest loan because you have to fly tomorrow morning because there's bombs are dropping tomorrow morning. Okay, I understand you're in a war zone, life or death situation. But if it's not a life or death situation, then every single difficulty is judged in its actual amount, not more than its amount, right? Because otherwise, then we are going to, right? Then we are going into the haram. And so remember that next time you hear somebody talk about, oh yeah, I bought a house, that's the three arguments. If there's a fourth, come and tell me. Number one, that we're in a war zone, which we're not. Number two, a dollar doesn't exist, which it does. If it doesn't exist, give it to me. If your money is not there, give it all to me. Okay, I'll accept your trash. Right? You can put it all in I'll take it to the dump yard for you. Okay. Number three, this is a widespread difficulty and I can't function. I don't believe that's true. Right? I know many people who make a lot of money in California, they rent because they're like, it's not worth it buying a house. They don't do it. Right? But many of us, we come up with this thing, I have to own property. You have to own property because what would people say? That's reality. People are laughing at you because you haven't bought property yet. People are criticizing you, or you started to worry. You're now in your 30s, 40s, 50s, like, what about my kids? What about my kids? Your kids are totally fine. Your kids are totally fine. If they have Iman, your kids are totally fine. If they don't have Iman, your kids have nothing. Anyway, you're not, right? It's like you have the biggest spoon in the world, but no food to eat. I have to have a spoon. They don't even have any food, Habibi. So what's the spoon going to do? It's not going to help them, right? Money is only useful for people who have Iman and strong Iman. Otherwise, it's not even useful for them. Right?
Second argument, it wouldn't even hold because you can't even use that money to purchase the house anyways, right?
The second argument, yeah, it's like, so it's not money. It's not money. But the third argument is the one that's at least has some logic, but then it's like, what we need to see is give me other examples in the Sharia where it's that widespread, right? And so Allahu A'lam. Okay. Indeed, and so it's a key thing to understand as well. Many times we get a fatwa from a scholar in the East who doesn't really understand the West. Right? They have a picture. right? There's a brother here. He was here last night. The Pashtun brother. I can't remember his name now. So his English isn't fantastic, and so he sits here and he was saying that his son leads the prayer in Pakistan, right? But the people don't pray behind him because they say this imam is a kafir because his dad lives in America. So their tasawwur, their picture of America is we're all like idol worshippers and bombing Muslims, right? Like every American like worships idols and bombs Muslims. Like that's not true, all right? Or some people like the whole of America is Christian. Like that's not true. The whole of America is wealthy. That's not true, right? There's tons of money everywhere. That's not true. There's lots of things that there's zina everywhere. Like everywhere you go, people are committing zina all the time. That's not actually true, is it? There's certain places you can go to, but otherwise it's not the case. So a lot of times there's a tasawwur that is not real. There's a concept that's not real. So you get a fatwa, it's like that's not reality of what's happening, right? It's not the reality of what's happening. And so, al-hukm ala shay far'un an tasawwurihi, right? Saying something about something comes from understanding what it is, right? Explain to me a situation, then I can give you a ruling. And often the fatwa is not it doesn't conform, it doesn't reflect reality, right? It doesn't reflect reality. So indeed, those who hide Allah's revelations, trading them for a fleeting gain, consume nothing but fire into their bellies. Allah will neither speak to them on the judgment day, nor will He purify them, and they will suffer a painful punishment. They are the ones who trade guidance for misguidance and forgiveness for punishment. How persistent they are in pursuit of the fire. Ma asbarahum ala nar. Right? This is how he's explaining it. Ma asbarahum ala nar is a difficult thing to translate. Right? What it literally means is, wow, they have a lot of patience with the hellfire. If they had a lot of patience with the hellfire, that would be great. Like if you could bear with the hellfire, that would be fantastic. That's not reality. So what it means is, ma asbarahum ala nar, it means ma ajra'ahum ala nar. Wow, they seem to have a lot of guts when it comes to playing with the hellfire, right? So he translates it as how persistent they are in pursuit of the fire. Like they really want, it's like when you tell somebody, bro, you really want me to punch you, don't you? Like I've told you stop, I've told you again, and you keep pushing me. Like you really want me to punch you, right? That's that kind of phrase. Ma asbarahum ala nar. It's like that. It's like you boys, you guys really want hellfire, don't you? Like that, the way that you're behaving, that's what it's implying. Ma asbarahum ala nar. That is because Allah has revealed the book in truth, and surely those who differ regarding it are totally engrossed in opposition. Righteousness is not turning your faces towards the east and the west. So this is a key thing. People, we mentioned, so the deen, it's the deen about rituals? Okay, no. So rituals don't matter then? No. Okay, I'm confused. The deen is not about rituals? But at the same time, rituals do matter. So explain. It's both the ma'na and the surah. Right? What's the point? Plus how you do it. Right? It's both of these things. So in terms of dress, for example, you have to cover your aura. Okay, well, I exposed my thigh because I was hot, not because I was trying to show it off to some lady. I'm just hot. I'm just wearing shorts. So that doesn't matter. It's your aura. You can't expose it. Okay, so the matter is the surah, how it appears. You got to cover from here to here. But also, if you are showing off or acting inappropriate, it's also haram. Right? So it's both. You have to pray on time, but you also have to focus. You can't just pray on time and just say some words in Arabic and it's okay. You have to do it's the surah and the ma'na, right? The outward rituals plus the meaning of the rituals, both of these things. So righteousness is not in turning this way and turning that way. Rather, righteousness is found in those who believe in Allah and the last day and the angels and the books and the prophets, who give charity out of their cherished wealth to relatives, orphans, the poor, needy, travelers, beggars, and for freeing captives. And so notice how it mentions the first category is who give charity to relatives. So your number one priority in giving charity is relatives, particularly if they hate you. Right? That's a very important thing to do. The Prophet ﷺ he said many things about the best type of sadaqah. But once he said, the best type of sadaqah is to give to relatives who hate you. And for a woman, the best relative is her husband. So for a woman, the best charity that she can give is to her husband. Now, the ulama disagree. Can she give zakat to her husband? Right? So her husband is in debt and she has gold jewelry. She's paying zakat now. Can she give that to her husband? They disagree because it's kind of it's like the money comes back to her, right? The whole point is supposed to go out. So the Hanafis, they say you can't do that. You can't give zakat to your husband because that money is going to go back to you, right? The Shafis say you can because it's independent. He could do whatever he wants with that money. And it happened to come back to you and it's fine. But charity though, right? Charity, the best person to give charity for a woman is her husband, right? Now, is she obliged to give charity to her husband? No. Can he say, hey, we've been married for 20 years now. I just want to share a hadith with you that I heard this morning that mashallah, you have a lot of money. Things are financially difficult for me and I'm trying to retire, Can you please, that's haram. That which is taken with the sword of awkwardness. You've taken it with the sword of awkwardness. You made them feel a bit awkward, right? Oh, you have lots of money. Can I borrow some? In front of everybody. Right? I have some food in my, the brother has some food in his hand. I'm like, oh, I'm hungry. Can I have some? That's muhrij. That's haraj. You put the person in an awkward situation. So now he's going to give it to you even though he doesn't want to. Right? And that's haram. You can't do that. Whatever is taken with the sword of awkwardness. So that's haram to do that. So it's haram for somebody to bully their wife into giving them money or expect it or make them feel embarrassed or kind of say, hey, look, I'm doing this. Right? So the situation would be like, sister, dearest, whatever I want to call you, you see the money I'm coming in and you see the money that's going out. You know that it's not making sense. More money goes out than is coming in. You have savings. You have income. I'm not telling you. I'm just asking, can you help? In a way that she can feel she can say no. And she said, let me think about it. And she's like, yeah, I'll help this one now. So she has to feel, you have to give her that emotional space that she can say, yeah, no. But if it's like, oh, you're a doctor and I'm a student, right? I'm just doing my master's. You're already a doctor. So come on, bro, you're making 20K a month. You're not going to help? Subhanallah, you're so cheap. That's haram. That's haram because you're making her feel like she has to pay. You can't do that, right? But if she wants to, it's fine. Not a problem, right? So there's a difference between, just like an interest. Somebody lends me $10 and I give him back 15. Is that halal or haram? Sunnah. How? So I borrowed 10 and he expected 10, but I gave him 15. That's sunnah to do that. But if he expected it and he's looking at me like, you don't have to, but it will be sunnah, it's haram. You see the difference? So it has to come from me, like that's a sunnah. So it changes from sunnah to haram in that kind of way, right? It all depends on the situation. And so the number one person then is relatives. So you have zakat, give it to your relatives, right? You have relatives, and so many of us, you have relatives, Afghanistan, whatever, Pakistan, wherever it is, Palestine. I don't know if you have, how far away, I don't know, but all left, whatever, right? But that's your number one, that's the number one thing, particularly if they hate you and they say bad stuff about you. That's a particular important thing to strengthen family ties, even if they keep saying bad things about you and about your family, whatever. It's good to give them charity, right? To orphans, the poor, the needy, beggars, and for freeing captives who establish the prayer. What does it mean to aqim as-salat? Doesn't mean I pray. MashaAllah, brother prays 5 times a day. No, praying 5 times a day is not that easy in reality. Praying 5 times a day is praying in the masjid if you're capable. It's not too far away. You're praying in jama'ah, you're at home, you pray and your wife prays by herself. It's like, that doesn't make any sense. Your dad prays at one and you pray by yourself. It doesn't make any sense, right? You should be praying in group prayer. All things being equal, he came back 2 a.m. and you need to go to sleep. Okay. But basically you're praying in jama'ah when possible, when practical, and you're doing it with proper focus, right? It's not hi mum, bye mum kind of prayer, right? So it's you're actually talking to Allah, right? And so, may Allah protect us. So that's called aqim as-salah. Although that's called ada as-salah, right? I prayed, right? I prayed, but did you pray? Right? So Salman al-Farisi, he said, what is it? He said, the prayer is like a mizan, right? And you either do ifa or tatfif, right? So the manifestation of the prayer is like a weighing scale. You either put the right amount in the weighing scale or you don't, right? And he says, and all of you know about the people who don't put the right amount. Al-mutaffifin. What does Allah say? Waylun lil-mutaffifin, right? So what did you put into the prayer? Bro, you're focused for like 1% of the prayer. Allahu Akbar and Assalamu alaikum. That was it. The rest of it, sujood, which is very profound and deep, right? So imagine, for example, your son is going somewhere. You're not going to see him again for a year. And you sit with him and just want to talk to him. Like, are you going to forget what you said to him? No, because it's meaningful. So the prayer should be like that. So if you're like, did I pray or not? It's a problem, right? Like imagine if you went home, you told your wife, hey, you know, we should spend more time together. So we were together this morning. You came back from work, went for a coffee. Did you forget? I said, yeah, sorry, I forgot. It was so meaningless to me that I forgot. You know, like it's everything that's meaningful you can't just forget it. Like there's certain things happened in prayer, certain conversations happened, right? So this is the prayer is it should be meaningful, right? This is iqamah. So it's a big thing. It's not a small thing. It's not like, okay, we pray, what's your problem? No, like iqamah salah, because then that's going to affect the way you behave. You just had a very awkward conversation with your creator. So now how can I talk to him like this? How can I do this? How can I do the haram? I've just been talking to my creator in this way, right? I've just been working on a relationship. So, but if we don't do that, it becomes very difficult. They establish the prayer, they pay their alms, and they keep the pledges that they make, and who are patient in times of suffering, adversity, and in the heat of battle. It is they who are the true in faith, and it is they who are the muttaqun, the people of taqwa. O believers, the law of retaliation, qisas, is set for you in cases of murder. A free man for a free man, a slave for a slave, and a female for a female. So this is qisas. Somebody intentionally kills my dad, I can have him killed. But is that what Islam teaches? No. That's the haqq that Allah gives me. So living in a place, some rural Pakistan or rural southern Jordan where there's tribalism, right? And this happens, Egypt, the same thing, right? Which is Afghanistan, right? So this non-stop war, right? Romeo and Juliet, that's what it is. The whole story of Romeo and Juliet is there's two tribes, two families, and there are these people at war with this, Bani Sakhar versus Bani Hassan, right? You remember that in Jordan? Not Jordanian enough. And in Jordan, there's these two Jordanian tribes, Bani Hassan and Bani Sakhar. And it's like the Crips and what's it called? And yeah, like that. And so and then you have like, oh, he's hitting on my girl and this kind of thing. And then somebody brings in a gun and that kind of stuff, right? It happens, particularly you go outside of Amman to it gets lawless. So now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, we understand you're a tribal people. That's fine. Family is important. And we understand these blood feuds happen, but let's organize them. Let's organize blood feuds. You killed him. Is it proven in court? Yes. Okay, now your family can have you killed. Finished with. But people do it don't do it in a lawful way. They do it in a lawless way. So it goes on forever and ever and ever. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala understands people are not necessarily forgiving. People do want vengeance. And so just do it in a halal way. Right? But what does Islam teach you? Islam doesn't teach us to do that. Islam teaches us to forgive. So you have the haqq, you have the right to retaliation. But the sunnah is to forgive. And if you forgive, you guarantee the forgiveness of your dad, for example, who was murdered. So my brother is Muhammad Shuman. He is not a very religious person. I'm not very religious. Badr kills him. And I'm like, I have two options. I could either kill Badr in a lawful way that doesn't go around in circles. It was done, it was established in court, and then the court applied it. This is the problem. They don't do it like that. They don't do it like that, right? And it's like this crazy tribal thing, which is not a part of the Sharia. So I could either do it that way, or I could say, you know what? My brother Muhammad, he was, like me. We didn't do good things. So I would prefer for him to be forgiven. So khalas. We, the awliya ad-dam, the people who have the right, we forgive you. Khalas, now done. Right? He doesn't go to prison, nothing happens to him. That's it, it's just forgiven. Right? And then there's the option 1.5 is I forgive you, but you got to pay for him because he was part of our tribe. We needed him. We needed him for work. He has a wife, etc. So you're going to pay the blood money. Right? That's kind of option B. So, but what the deen teaches us is forgiveness. Right? If your wife cheats on you, what does the Sharia teach you? Don't expose her and forgive her. Now, I don't know. I've never met somebody who could do that. What kind of iman is that like? Most people will go insane, right? They're not, the iman goes somewhere else. But that's the difference between the person who has iman and doesn't have iman, right? But the sunnah is, somebody kills your dad, I forgive you. Somebody slaps you in the face, I forgive you. وَإِذَا خَاطَبَهُمُ الْجَاهِلُونَ قَالُوا سَلَامًا. When rude people are rude to them, bro, you're driving like an idiot. I'm sorry, it was my fault. It's totally his fault. Totally his fault. But I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done that. My apologies. Why are you eating all the food? I haven't even eaten anything yet. Brother, you always sit here. I've never been in this masjid before. Right? So should you say, get out of my face, I've never been in the masjid before? Or should you say, I'm sorry? Right? That's what you should do. You say, I'm sorry, and forgive and forget, right? That's the sunnah that we're supposed to do. But again, there's a difference. So there's a difference between what you can do and the haqq that Allah gives you, right? So again, coming to finances, my husband cannot make ends meet. Like he can't pay the rent. And I'm working and I'm working and working. And then I'm like, actually, I don't want to do this. So as a Muslimah, do I have to support? Do I have to pay towards the rent and pay towards the kids? No, I do not. I'm not obliged to do that. I don't want to work. That's not my obligation. That's not my obligation. So I don't want to do it. Yes, mashallah, I have a degree. I could work. I don't want to do it. I've decided I don't want to do it. I've done it for 10 years. It's not working out. So now what's going to happen? So she has a right to nafaqah. She's right to be supported. Her husband cannot support her. She goes to the Sharia court and says, I want to annul my marriage. Okay, sister, I understand. You have a haqq for that. Is that the best thing to do? No. But that's your haqq. There's a difference in what is your haqq and what you should do, right? So you could divorce your wife if she ticks you off. That's your right. You can do that. Is that a good thing to do? Not such a good thing to do. But you can do that. You don't like her. You married her, don't like her. You can do that. That's your haqq. But there's a big difference between what is your right, and how you should behave Islamically. There's a big difference. But if the offender is pardoned by the victim's guardian, then blood money should be decided fairly, and payment should be made courteously. This is a concession and a mercy from your Lord. But whoever transgresses after that, so the blood feud continues, will suffer a painful punishment. There is security in life for you in the law of retaliation, right? There are many rules that don't make sense. So the point of any law, when people create laws, right, they create laws based on their own understanding. And basically laws are there to prevent people doing things, right? So for example, I got a ticket. I was like, when I first came to America, I was just driving everywhere 100 miles an hour. I looked at people, I see everyone's driving 100 miles an hour. I just drove for like 1 year. I drove past policemen 100 miles an hour. No, nobody stopped me ever. So I just thought that's okay. Just when in Rome, everybody's driving 100, so I'll just drive 100. So once I'm driving, and then there's this, I'm driving there, talk to my wife, and then this car pulls me over, and like I don't know what the officer wanted. He's like, are you going 84? No, so I was going 94. And I was like, okay. He's like, you're speeding. I'm like, okay, but the whole road is speeding. Nobody's going 65, are they? Like nobody is going 65 on the freeway. So I'm okay, fine. I'm a law-abiding citizen, but explain the logic. He said, listen, there was a hill, and I'm sitting here waiting for that one person. I saw you, and I was like, okay, I mean that's not really fair, then, right? He said, I know it's not fair, but like, okay, so like, am I going to go and drive 65? I don't drive 65 now. I can't do that, but like, I drive 80 now, right? So the law stopped me. I paid $500, and I don't want to do that again. I was pulled over here driving 45. Dude, that's not speeding. It says 35. I'm like, come on, bro, like 35, 45, that's not a thing. It's like, that's not speeding. But anyway, technically it's speeding. So anyway, now, and I had to pay $300 for driving 45 miles an hour. So now I'm going to be like, okay, I'll stick to the rules. I don't want to pay $300. I don't want to pay $500. So this is called a radi', right? The thing that stops you doing something. You don't want to pay the money, don't speed. Okay. So here's the issue: is that if you're happy to be killed, then kill, because that's what's going to happen to you. If you want to beat somebody up, you're going to be beaten up. You want to cut somebody's hand off, your hand can be cut off. Right? Realize that. You want to rape somebody and get stoned to death, go ahead. Right? Go ahead. So this is called a radi'. There are many laws in many places that don't make any sense. So we're in California right now. Obviously, America's kind of going down the drain. But, we see these things, right? Shoplifters, it's like, shoplifting is basically another way of selling now. Because you walk in, you come out with $500 of merchandise. They take that, they put it they claim it in insurance, and it's basically a sale. So the company, it's a sale without the hassle. There's no issue. So now we're living in a society that's falling apart because it's not safe, right? It's not a safe society. If you can't defend your property is not safe. It's not a safe society, right? So these systems are in place, like you can't do these things. And if you do Allah says there is life in taking life for life. It keeps people alive. So people know you're going to die, right? If you do this, okay. So now you're going to do it, right? And there's many things that kind of, so I mentioned before, like in China, smuggling drugs into China is death. So you want to bring in cocaine into China and sell it to some big, people, that's fine. But if they catch you, you're going to die. That's it. So now you know what kind of games you're playing with, right? Okay. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, it is prescribed that when death approaches any of you, that you leave something of value. So originally, there were no inheritance rules. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it obligatory for people to leave a wasiyah, to leave a bequest. So you have money, you should say, this is going to so-and-so, this is going to so-and-so, etc. Right? Afterwards, the verses of inheritance were revealed, and that did nasakh, that abrogated these things. Right? So according to the majority of scholars, it is not obligatory to have a bequest. Right? The Hanafis, they say it's obligatory to have a bequest, but for the majority of scholars, it's not obligatory to have a bequest. You don't have to have a bequest because you already have the deen has already put it in place. This is how it's going to be distributed anyway. Right? Now, why is it practical for us? Many of us, we have non-Muslim relatives. You have a non-Muslim wife. You have a non-Muslim mum, dad. Okay? So if you don't put a bequest, they're not going to get anything. Your dad is a non-Muslim and he's a trillionaire. When he dies, you're not going to get anything. So you tell him, listen, I'm a Muslim, and this is how it works. This is how you have to make a bequest. So in which case you should do that, right? Also, if you're in a Muslim country, whether you like it or not, the inheritance will be divided Islamically. Right. So again, I was in Jordan. You go to the Sharia court, they deal with marriage and inheritance. Whether you're religious or not, it doesn't matter. What happens is the person died, goes to the police to the courts, it goes to the bank. His money is frozen. That money is now frozen. It's now going to be divided based on this and has to go through the process. He has property in his name, can't be sold. Nobody can sell that property because it's been registered this man has died. So now it's going to be divided up and they're going to have to do it. So whether you're religious or not religious, it's already going to be done for you. You don't have a choice. In a non-Muslim country, it's not like that. So is your wife going to get the right proportion? Is your children? So in a non-Muslim country, what you need to do is basically find out what the Sharia would do if it was in place and make that your legal bequest. Particularly if you have money, right? You've got money, you've got savings, you've got property, you have a lawyer, you do your will. Like go and make sure it's done because otherwise it might not be done properly. Right? And so it is important to do that. So we mentioned two scenarios we should do it in a non-Muslim country because the law does not do it for you and because people have non-Muslim family, right? So it says, prescribed to you that when death approaches any of you, you should leave something of value. So what should you leave? What should you leave to your kids? Right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned it before. He said, when you come to the haram, you can bring food and clothes, etc. وَتَزَوَّدُوا وَإِنَّ خَيْرَ الزَّادِ التَّقْوَى. Right? If you want to come to the haram, fine, you can bring food, you can bring clothes, that's fine. But the things you should bring is taqwa. So what we should leave our kids is taqwa. It really doesn't matter if you give them money or doesn't give them money. That's not very it's not very important. It's really not important. Like, so thing to focus on in life is day in, day out, I have kids. Are these kids, how is the deen? And was I too strict with them, or was I too easy with them? Every single one of us were too strict with our kids or too easy with our kids. We let our kids watch too much TV or too little TV. We let our kids pray too little. Like we don't tell them to pray, or we tell them pray every 20 rakats of tarawih, or you're banned from computer games for the next 2 years. Right? So it's either one extreme or another extreme. Every single one of us, we're extreme. So our worry and concern is my kid's deen, right? Do they understand that the akhirah is more important than the dunya? Do they understand halal is like haram is a no-go zone, right? Do they understand that life works when you do what Allah wants? Like there's a thing in your mind. Life, oh yeah, it worked out because you did what was right. It worked out because it did what is right. They process things in the right way. That's what we want for our kids. The kids don't need property. They don't need to go to college. They don't need anything. That's all extra. That's not, Allah's not asking you to provide what you don't have. If you have lots of money, alhamdulillah, if you can pay for their college in advance, alhamdulillah, that's great. Not a problem, right? But giving your kids money is not very useful, right? It's not very useful. It's like giving your wife money. So you have a wife, she lives in Alaska and you live in the Philippines. And you just send her money. Well, I love you so much. Send you money. Don't see her, don't talk to her. It's not really a relationship. But money is, I mean, it's not bad, but it's just not, that's not the relationship, right? And so I mentioned in the beginning of just before Ramadan, the book, Danny, the Champion of the World. I think, can you remember that book? So Danny, the Champion of the World is a Roald Dahl book. You know, Roald Dahl, the author of like the BFG, the author of Matilda and these kind of things. So he's this children author. And so he has this book, Danny, the Champion of the World, which is a story of this kid who his mum dies when he's a baby, and all he remembers is his dad washing him and cleaning him, and and they're very poor. He lives in England somewhere, and they have a gas station, and they live in a little RV, like a caravan, a gypsy caravan in reality. But every single night, his dad tells him stories, and he's like, he's so cool. He can do stuff. He makes kites. They do fun stuff. Like he wakes up in the middle of the night. His dad looks after him. It's like, Dad spent time with me. Dad loves me. Dad is fun, right? And then there's a whole story of how his dad is actually a poacher and does funny ways to steal people's pheasants and da. It's a whole game, and then it's a funny story. But like that's the picture of somebody of the dunya. Like that's reality. Like in the dunya, like if my dad spent time with me. It was fun. We liked it. And for us as well, that's how it is. You want your kids to pray. You can't just tell them to do things. It doesn't work. Okay, now you're 7, you have to pray 5 times. It doesn't work like that. It doesn't work, right? I'm your dad. You're my child. Obey me. That's not how. I mean, in principle, it should work like that. In principle, our children should have adab and akhlaq. But if we have to earn it. Like, so we have to spend time with them. We have to do this. We have to do that. We have to make career choices that are different, live in different states that are cheaper so I can go fishing with my kids. All sorts of things. Like all of these things are like real, very practical things. And we often just think of the wrong thing. I need to make as much money as possible. And I need to make sure my son gets the best education so that he can make as much money as possible. That's not very useful. Not very useful. Like I know a particular situation of a kid like that. His dad worked very, very hard. His dad sent him to Switzerland to do his high school, and then sent him paid for his engineering and another engineering degree. And the kid's just sitting at home doing nothing. I don't know if he prays. So in the dunya and the akhirah, is nothing. It's like it doesn't actually work. So we cannot guarantee that our kids die as believers. We cannot guarantee that our kids are righteous. But we can try and do a good job by spending time with them, etc. Right? As opposed to, my kids need money. Your kids don't need money. Right? Your kids don't need money. Right? Again, my dad died. I don't have anything from my dad at all. I have a few things here and there. I don't remember him spending lots of money on us, but he did spend time with us. He did tell us stories. He did come into my school, do things. I remember things, right? So my relationship with my dad is like 90% spiritual, 10% family. So what does that mean? It means he's not dead. Right? My dad passed away more than a year ago. He's not dead for me because that spiritual side of it doesn't change. Just like the Prophet ﷺ is not alive anymore. Okay. But is he not any part of your life? He's like 100% of your life. Here's the sunnah every single time. Sunnah. Every time you do the sunnah, he's there with you. It's the same. Whether he's alive or not alive is the same. So this is what we want. It's like if you don't have deen, you're already dead. If you have deen, you're alive and you won't die. That's the concept. If you have deen, you're alive and you won't die. You'll still be, Imam Bukhari is still with us. Imam Muslim is still with us. Sahl ibn Abdul Salam Tustari is still with us. All these people of the past, people, the ulama, the salihin, they're still with us. And the dead people, Julius Caesar and who knows what, they're all dead. They're gone, right? Pharaoh's gone. But everybody, like the people of the deen is still, and then your efforts continue in your kids, right? Your third generation. So this is, such an important thing. Like I'm not looking at my kids, I'm looking at 20 generations ahead. What I'm doing today, the decision I made, should I drive Uber later on or should I drive Uber now? Should I go, like so many times, like for example, during like I basically like never fast apart from like Ashura and a few things. And why? Because my kids. Like if I fasted, I wouldn't be able to play with them. So what's more important, playing with my kids or fasting? I'm saying playing with my kids. Because it's an issue of Iman and Kufr tomorrow. I really don't care about fasting. Mondays, Thursdays, not important. That's not an important thing at all. That's happened once. Like I always, I'm 3 minutes away. Like so many times, I'm always trying to make sure in the masjid. Like once it was like my kids, like I really want to go on a bike ride. I was like, okay, I will miss the prayer because it's more important for me to go on a bike ride with my kids. So then I can say, hey, we just prayed. We went on a bike ride. We did this. Habibi, let's pray. As opposed to pray, no, pray, no. And then what's going to happen tomorrow? He's going to walk out of the house. That's what's going to happen. And if he lives in the house, he's going to come in at midnight when I'm asleep and wake up at 10 a.m. when I've gone to work. That's what life's going to be. And I'm going to say, you should go to the mosque. Be like, yeah, sure. It's in one ear, out the other ear. That's how it is. So kids by the age of like 8, 9, they've already got to have their own mind. Right? They're already their own person. You can't force them to do things. You can tell them, try and convince them. You could physically put them up, but it doesn't work like that. You put them in a maktab, it doesn't mean anything. So the only way is the emotional way, right? And so this is what we have to give our kids, give them deen. What did you leave behind them? What did you leave behind? Right? There's religious memories, fun and things that they're like, oh yes, I understand why I'm fasting with my dad, praying with my dad telling me this, my dad telling me that. Don't do this, do this, religious things. And there was a good relationship that right? And then it lasts, that you're still alive. But otherwise, you die when you die. And that's what the Prophet said. When your actions cut off, right? When you die, apart from 3 things, the sadaqah jariyah, an endowment, you built a masjid and it's still going. You planted a tree and they still eat from it, etc. You built an orphanage, right? Knowledge that you taught to people and they benefit from it, right? Like you teach elementary school and you teach people how to write every single time they write. They're writing a prescription in hospital right now and they're 60 and you taught them 90 years ago when they were, when not 90 years ago, but whatever, when you were 60 and they were a little kid and you taught them how to write the letter O. And every single time they write letter O, you get the ajr. So these things that last, right? Every single time say this is how you change the oil. And they can't call this is how you should speak to mama. Talk to her like this. Like, oh, okay. And now you save his marriage. And he saves his grandchildren's marriage. It goes on and on and on. Right? These kind of things. And what? A righteous child that makes dua for you. So if you don't have righteous children, what do you have? You don't have children. Right? You don't have children. Just like if you have lots of money, but you can't spend it. I'm a millionaire, but I'm in prison. You don't have money then. You don't have anything. So if you don't have righteous children, you don't have children. If you don't have a righteous life, you don't have a religious life, you're not alive, you're dead. The Prophet said, the house in which Allah is remembered and the house in which Allah is remembered is like the living and the dead. You go to home, what's the feeling of house? La ilaha illallah, Allahu Akbar, whatever, or as opposed to everything else. Right? So it's either a life or death. Right? This is how things are. Let's find a good place to pause. This is the obligation for those who are mindful, but whoever changes the will after hearing it, and the blame will only be on those who change it. Indeed, Allah is all hearing and all knowing. Whoever suspects an error or injustice in the will and brings about a fair settlement among the parties will not be sinful. And surely Allah is all forgiving, most merciful. And it goes on to 83 about fasting, inshallah ta'ala. We'll stop there. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. سبحان الله وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب